There is a thought that keeps coming back. You push it away. You distract yourself. You tell yourself it is not worth the energy. And then, sometimes hours later, sometimes days, it is there again, exactly as it was, waiting. That thought is not a malfunction. It is not anxiety producing noise for no reason. It is not your mind betraying you with pointless repetition. It is carrying something specific, a piece of information your conscious mind has been refusing to fully receive, and it will keep returning with the same patient persistence until you finally do. This is not a metaphor. This is how memory consolidation and emotional processing actually work in the human mind. And once you understand what your recurring thoughts are actually doing, not to you but for you, the experience of being someone who cannot stop thinking changes entirely. Not because the thoughts stop, because you finally understand what they are trying to say. But before we get into how to read what your thoughts are carrying, there is one specific type of recurring thought that contains the most important information and gets dismissed the most consistently. A thought so uncomfortable that most people spend enormous energy keeping it from completing itself. We will get to that type precisely. And when we name it, you will recognize it immediately because it has probably been circling you for longer than you want to admit. First, here is what is actually happening when a thought keeps returning despite your best efforts to move past it. Your mind processes experience on two levels simultaneously. There is the conscious level, the one you are aware of, the one that makes decisions, the one that decided the situation was handled and it was time to move on. And there is the processing level beneath it, the one that evaluates whether the experience was actually resolved, whether the emotion was fully felt, whether the understanding reached was complete, or whether something important was skipped in the rush to get to done. When those two levels agree, when your conscious mind says resolved and your deeper processing confirms it, the thought releases. It files. It becomes memory rather than active signal. You can access it if you want to, but it does not keep returning uninvited because the work it was doing is finished. When those two levels do not agree, when your conscious mind declared the situation handled but your deeper processing detected something unfinished, the thought does not file. It stays active, keeps surfacing, not because your mind is broken or because you are failing to regulate properly, because the processing is not complete and the thought is the signal that something still needs attention. Here is the strange part that most people who experience this have never been told. The thought is not the problem. The thought is the notification. And treating it as something to be suppressed or managed or distracted away from is like turning off a fire alarm because the sound is annoying. The alarm is not the issue. The alarm is telling you something needs to be addressed. What most people do with recurring thoughts, and what the entire attention management industry has been built around helping people do, is find more effective ways to turn off the alarm. Mindfulness techniques that create distance from the thought. Cognitive reframing that challenges the thought's content. Distraction strategies that fill the space the thought was occupying with something else. All of these approaches treat the thought as the problem to be solved rather than as information to be received. And all of them fail in the same specific way. The thought comes back because the processing that generated it is still incomplete. And no amount of distance, reframing, or distraction addresses the underlying incompleteness that is keeping the signal active. Most people completely miss this because they have been taught to evaluate their mental health by how quiet their mind is. A mind that produces fewer recurring thoughts is considered healthier than one that produces more. But that evaluation assumes the thoughts are random noise rather than specific signals. And if the thoughts are signals, if they are carrying actual information about unfinished processing, then a quieter mind is not necessarily a healthier one. It may simply be a more effectively suppressed one. And this leads directly to the question that changes everything about how you relate to your own thinking. Not how do I stop this thought, but what is this thought trying to tell me that I have not yet been willing to hear? Because every recurring thought has a specific answer to that question. And the answer is almost always one of three things. The first is an emotion that was not fully felt. Something happened, a loss, a disappointment, a moment of being treated in a way that hurt, and you processed it to the point of functional but not to the point of complete. You got yourself back to okay. You moved on. You stopped giving the situation more of your attention than seemed reasonable. But the emotion that the experience generated did not finish its process. It is still there midway through something, and the thought is the marker keeping the place until you are ready to go back and complete it. The second is a truth you have not yet been willing to admit. Something about a relationship, a situation, a decision, or yourself that your deeper processing has already assessed clearly but that your conscious mind has been actively avoiding because the implications are too uncomfortable to sit with. The thought keeps returning because the truth it contains keeps being refused entry. And it will keep returning, with exactly the same persistence and exactly the same content, until you let the truth land completely rather than redirecting every time it gets close. Here is where it gets really interesting, because this second type is the one I mentioned at the beginning, the thought that contains the most important information and gets dismissed the most consistently. The thought you have become skilled at interrupting before it completes itself. The one that starts forming and then gets replaced by something safer, an action, a distraction, a rationalization, before it can finish saying what it was trying to say. You know the one. It has been starting and stopping for long enough that you have developed an almost automatic response to it. The moment it begins, something else arrives. An urge to check your phone, a sudden memory of something that needs doing, a mental pivot toward literally anything that is not that thought completing itself. And the pivot feels like choice, like discipline, like you being in control of your mind rather than at the mercy of it. But the thought is still there, and it is still carrying what it has always been carrying, waiting for the moment you finally let it finish. The third type of recurring thought is a need that is not being met. Not a want, a genuine psychological need that your current situation is not providing. For connection at a depth that your current relationships do not reach. For work that uses the full capacity of your mind rather than a fraction of it. For honesty in a situation where you have been performing something other than what you actually feel. The thought keeps surfacing because the need keeps going unaddressed. And it will keep surfacing until either the need gets met or you make a conscious decision about what you are doing with the gap between what you need and what you currently have. Remember the recurring thought you were holding at the very beginning of this video, the one that keeps coming back no matter how many times you push it away? Now you know what it is doing. It is not tormenting you. It is not evidence that something is wrong with your mind. It is carrying one of those three things. An emotion waiting to be completed. A truth waiting to be admitted. A need waiting to be acknowledged. The question is not how to make it stop. The question is what it has been trying to say, and whether you are finally ready to let it finish. Because the thought will not stop returning until the message it carries has been fully received. That is not a threat. It is actually the most reliable thing about your mind. It will not let you permanently file something unresolved as finished. It will keep the signal active until the processing is complete. And in a world full of people who have learned to suppress that signal so effectively they no longer know what they have not yet processed, that persistence is not a burden. It is your mind refusing to let you abandon yourself completely. Tell me in the comments, is there a thought that keeps coming back for you no matter how many times you push it away? You do not have to share what it is. Just tell me. Do you think it is trying to tell you something you have not been ready to hear?